Member for Surrey Newton.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And it's always good to stand and entertain the minister from Vancouver or somewhere out there. Mr. Speaker, this is my second opportunity after I started on Thursday to finish off my budget speech. What I said on Thursday was, Mr. Speaker, that the one thing is very clear in the budget. The top 2% in British Columbia will continue to get tax breaks from this government. Top 2%. $230 million last year, $230 million this year, 2 more years, total of $1 billion tax break for the top 2%. Madam Speaker. And then you look at on the other side, Mr. Speaker, the ordinary working people, the middle class, those who don't have a means and fixed income, Mr. Speaker. BC Hydro continue to go up for them. MSP premiums continue to go up. BC ferries continue to go up. Park fees continue to go up, Mr. Speaker. ICBC premiums continue to go up. That's the top choice that this government has made, as they have said, minister after minister, speaker after speaker, that they had to make some tough choices. Those are the choices. Choices, very clearly, Mr. Speaker, top 2% continue to get tax break, and those hard-working, middle-class people on fixed income, this government continue to go deeper and deeper into their pockets. That is exactly what is happening, Mr. Speaker. Now, let's take a look. What are they doing to some of the real issues that we all face out there? There's nothing, Mr. Speaker, about affordability. And Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Advanced Education, I'm talking about affordability. Minister of Advanced Education, I haven't got a clue what we are talking about here when we talk about affordability. I mean, that's clear. That's very clear, as he chirped away, Mr. Speaker. There's nothing, Mr. Speaker, no answers to the public transportation.
Members, order. Order.
Mr. Speaker, I think they will have their opportunity to speak. They have nothing to say. They keep on chirping away at other people, and that has been the history of these two ministers, at least, Mr. Speaker. They chirp away out there. When their opportunity comes, they have nothing to say. Nothing to say. Mr. Speaker, and Mr. Bill, let's continue on. They have nothing, no answer here for public transportation extension in Vancouver or south of the Fraser, Mr. Speaker. There's nothing, Mr. Speaker, to combat crime in British Columbia, especially south of the Fraser in Surrey, Mr. Speaker, where we have 60 shootings last year, Mr. Speaker. There's nothing to deal with the forest industry that is on its knees under the watch of this government, Mr. Speaker. 31,000 fewer people are working in the forest industry today than when they took over, Mr. Speaker, 2001. Mr. Speaker, there's nothing to deal with the wait times in Surrey Memorial Hospital or other places, anywhere in the province. And here is the one, Mr. Speaker, for the Minister of Post-Secondary Education. Nothing to deal with all those students who need to go to the post-secondary education, get their skills and training upgraded, Mr. Speaker, in order to get jobs in the future. Because 80% of the future jobs, Mr. Speaker, will require some sort of post-secondary education degree or diploma, and there's nothing. It's becoming more and more difficult for students to get to post-secondary education. And tuition fee continue to rise, Mr. Speaker. So that is the record of this government. Let's talk about some of the real issues that are facing outside of these that are faced by hard-working small businesses employed in taxi industry and in the trucking industry, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker,
members, orders.
Mr. Speaker, let's take a look at taxi industry first. Let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at that. I know they don't want to hear this. And I know they don't want to hear about the truckers issue either. And I know that. And you'll see that when truth comes, that this government, especially those ministers who were involved in it, how they would just shy away and walk away from this issue. Let's talk about taxi industry. Mr. Speaker, there are over 2,000 families who depend on taxi industry in Lower Mainland. 2,000 licenses are out there. You multiply by 2, you're talking about 5,000, 6,000 families depend on taxi industries. They mortgage their homes to buy those jobs. There are many drivers working in the taxi industry. What does this government do, Mr. Speaker? About a year and a half ago, they're just playing political games with the taxi industry. That's not the way to operate and come up with the policies to deal with the hardworking small businesses and hardworking people of this province. 2014, the Minister of Transportation said, no way to Uber. If Uber wants to come in, they must come through just like every taxi company and every taxi owner went through to get their taxi license. That's what's said in 2014. Guess what? Uber is very, very rich, $62 billion company. What they do, like they have done everywhere else, they went to the top. They went into the Premier's office, hired 2 of our high officials, Principal Secretary, Dimitri Pentrozopoulos, and Carling Dick. Guess what? Now they have a direct line to the Premier's office. And they are working for a company called Maple Leaf Strategies, who are lobbying on behalf of Uber for this government. So now the ministers are meeting with them. And I want to say this. One meeting took place July 21 in 2015 with the Minister of Technology was chirping away here because he didn't want to hear the truth. What happened after that? The Minister of Transportation's tone changed. From no way to Uber, he went on to say, it's a matter of when, not if. Uber is inevitable. That's what the Minister of Transportation said after that meeting that took place with the Minister of Technology. Something happened there. And the Minister of Technology have to have a lot of explanation to do to the taxi industry. Many of those people live in his riding. He has to come out and explain what was it that he said to Uber? What was it that he did in his capacity? Did he support his taxi industry? Or did he support Uber and start lobbying his government on behalf of Uber? He has to come up and answer, have some answers on that. He has not said anything about that. But the factors are clear. After that meeting, things changed. The minister is saying now it's inevitable. It's a matter of when, not if. So, Mr. Speaker, when there was a lot of pressure from the taxi industry, the local communities, then the government said, oh, well, not anytime soon. The minister was making taking 2 or 3 different positions. When he went to the South Asian media, he had a different position. When he went to the mainstream media, he had a different position. But at the end of the day, the Premier took that file away from the Minister of Transportation and gave it to the Minister of TransLink. Lo and behold, Mr. Speaker, now we find out that his Chief of Staff's daughter is Carling Dick, who is employed by Maple Leaf Strategies, who are lobbying this government on behalf of Uber. Clear conflict, Mr. Speaker. And I must say, it's not a fault of Carling Dick or her mother, who is a Chief of Staff with the Minister of TransLink. It's the minister. It's his responsibility. He must know what those conflict of interest rules are. He must ensure that not only that he must not be in conflict of interest, but there should be no perception. He left no doubt in anybody's mind that clearly is a conflict of interest. Now the minister is saying, well, we will not do anything until the election. Mr. Speaker, what a comfort to the taxi industry. He didn't say that we will ensure that there's a level playing field. Whether it's Uber or somebody else or the taxi industry, they must come in through the same level playing field as far as the transportation rules and regulations are concerned, Mr. Speaker. He didn't say that. He said not until the election. What does that say? That clearly says, you dare elect us again, we will bring Uber in. And taxi industry knows that. They know that the jobs are in danger, and they will be bankrupted by a stroke of a pen by one of these ministers. They know that. So that's one thing, how they play games with the hard-working small businesses in favor of a multinational, Mr. Speaker. That's the record of this government. Now let's talk about truckers. If you remember, there was a long strike at the port, the container truck operators. They were out for weeks. Mr. Speaker, they will not do anything when it was brought to their attention by Unifor, the union that represents many of those truckers, the UTA, United Truck Association, Mr. Speaker, and they would not listen to them because they were warned time and again since 2005 that the shutdown is imminent. The government will do nothing. This government will say, well, it's a federal government. And the federal government say, no, the provincial government had to deal with this. And the provincial government, together, when they get together, they say, well, the port has to deal with this. So they're throwing this thing all over the place except taking responsibility on themselves. And yes, there was a port shutdown. I believe it was 6 weeks. Many businesses lost big time as a result of that. Those truckers lost big time. Even during the strike, Mr. Speaker, this government continues to say, well, it's their fault. We will talk to them if they go back to work first. And lo and behold, Mr. Speaker, what happened? When we fought on the side of the truckers, and this government brought in back to work legislation, without even settling the issue, we were fighting here on behalf of the truckers. And then there was a settlement. The same government, the ministers who were saying it was the truckers' fault, it wasn't this government's fault. They were tripping over each other to get in front of the camera that they settled this dispute. Well, everyone was happy that the dispute was settled. And they promised that the truckers will get retroactive pay. They are guaranteed rates now, Mr. Speaker. Well, guess what? They're still waiting for the retroactive pay. Still. Not only that, Mr. Speaker, now the commissioner is in court over agreement that this government signed, the premier signed, federal government signed, and the truckers are refusing to pay retro. Many did, but there are a few still out there. And the government is in hiding. Not doing anything now, because they got their photo op. Then, Mr. Speaker, the commissioner was appointed through legislation here. The port went ahead and hired new trucks. I mean, they brought in a new process to bring in the truckers who would qualify to come and work at the port. You know what? Again, a grade 5 student can do a better job. What did they do? They put a process and they put a deadline that by that date, all those who wish to work at the port make an application. And these will be their prerequisites. They all sign on the prerequisites. And this is what they did during that process. Before the deadline was over, many applied, and they said you must have 4 points to qualify or a 10. They have a number of criteria. They give you points. If you get 4, you're in. But before the process was over, before the deadline was over, they raised the threshold to 6 points. So many people with 5 points were left out when people with 4 points were in. They had to go to the court, Mr. Speaker, to have that thing thrown out. This is how bad they treat the truckers. And this government come for photo ops, come across as if they support the truckers, but once the photo op is over, they're nowhere to be seen, and those truckers are left to fight their own fight. And they were left with the understanding that this government somehow has solved their problems. And then what, Mr. Speaker? It didn't even end there. Now there's the issue of truck age, that those trucks cannot be 10-year or more than 10-year-old. Here's what the truckers have to say, and I'll read you the letter. Mr. Ranjit Barn wrote this. He said, here are some of the issues concerning the container truck owners, operators about the age limit on their trucks and the environment concerns imposed by the port and the TLS. Number one, Fraser Surrey Dock, Surrey, Fraser River. Many heavy highway trucks are using these facilities for many purposes, from container yard, lumber yard, steel, metal. The users of the container yard are being forced to upgrade their trucks in accordance with the TLS requirement to meet the environmental concerns they have imposed. The users of the lumber yard and the steel metal yard are not being forced to upgrade to make any changes with their trucks. Anyway, they can simply continue to use their existing trucks that do not meet any of the requirements imposed by the port. The TLS has not said anything to the user of the lumber yard or the steel metal yard users. Also, the container yard equipment, they call them the yard hustlers. Those are the machines that they use within the yard, Mr. Speaker, to move those containers around. And the machinery is quite old, and we are pretty sure that this equipment and machinery does not meet any of the TLS requirement for their environmental concerns. Clearly, this shows how this is not fair to the outside users of the container yard. Number two, Linterm, North Vancouver, North Shore Broad Inlet. These properties are also used by many trucks, as well as there's no TLS truck age and environment requirement in place, similar to what is used above with the Fraser Surrey docks. Number three, Vanterm and Canterm terminals on Commissioner Street. On Commissioner Street, there is a Rogers Sugar, West Coast Reduction, Columbia Containers, Versa Gold, Ocean Fisheries, and many more businesses. Again, any truck is able to access these businesses, which are located on the same street as the Vanterm and Canterm terminals, but to access Vanterm and Canterm terminals, you need a truck that meets the TLS truck age and environment requirements. So you can see this clearly isn't fair to the trucks using the Vancouver ports, as these regulations put in place are not fair and don't really resolve any issue on environmental concerns that they are imposing. Mr. Speaker, clearly, on many areas of the Vancouver ports, only the container truckers are required to go these restrictions, the age of the truck and the environmental equipment that they have to have. It's not fair, Mr. Speaker. So those are some of the things that are clearly, again, before the courts. Now let's talk about some of the other issues. We have serious issues about WCB, PTSD, Mr. Speaker. There's so many first responders who go through trauma, and there's hardly anything for them when they are suffering from that trauma. They're left on their own, Mr. Speaker. That's not you treat our workers the way this government's treating. So, Mr. Speaker, that is, again, I'm told that my time is running out. That's not very good. I've got so much to say. And then we have our education system, Mr. Speaker. I have a lot more to say. Probably will speak again.
Thank you, member.
But thank you very much. My time ran out.